Up now, we have Forum Daily's weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, Senior Petroleum Analyst at gaswizard.ca. All yours, Dan.
Well, thank you very much for that, Nima. This is going to be a very interesting time on energy markets, and we now know the full effect of high energy prices, not just gasoline, diesel, continuing to exert upward pressure on inflation, which has the Bank of Canada in turn saying, well, maybe we have to continue raising those interest rates. Interesting note this morning, I think that came from Blacklock's reporter uh, covering Mark Carney, fundraiser for the Liberals, well noted for his ambitions on green and perhaps even the future leadership of the Liberal Party, now saying that the inflation that we're seeing here today is made at home. In other words, the idea that somehow this is the result of wars or other factors or post-COVID turbulence is not really the case. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But we have been saying here at Canadians for Affordable Energy for some time that the federal government's move to try to increase taxes, regulate this industry, prevent the world from getting what is the cleanest oil and gas available in the world using the ESG rankings, has significant and I would frankly, I'd argue, disastrous potential economic consequences for Canada. We're going to see those in the days to come. Most notably, in what could have been price decreases in part of the week, we're now starting to see prices for gasoline and diesel firm up. Vancouver's seen a really big decrease in the 2.42 range all the way down now to $1.82 to $1.85. They're likely to stay there. In Alberta, look for gas prices to moderate a little bit more, now pushing well below $1.60, maybe towards the $1.55 range. And of course, for Saskatchewan and Manitoba, especially Winnipeg, we should start to see gas prices surrender as retailers are making extraordinarily decent margins. By that, I mean usually 8 to 10 cents a liter, they're picking up 20. So I would expect those prices to drop about 8 cents a liter this time next week. And of course, in Ontario, where we've been pushing between $1.59 and $1.64, look for those prices to remain range bound, pretty much there, as is the same case for Quebec, Montreal, in the $1.79, $1.82 range. I don't see much of a change there. And ditto for the Atlantic provinces, where, of course, they're still paying $1.75 to $1.80 for a liter of gasoline. The big story, however, Nima, is going to be diesel. As we've been saying for quite some time, the shortage is real. It's there for a variety of reasons, some of them going back a few years to the so-called IMO 2020, International Maritime Organization's requirement for low sulfur diesel used for ships around the world. That's required diesel to be recalibrated, reburned, if you will. And so the old adage that diesel is somehow the lower part of the barrel and doesn't take much to produce and therefore it shouldn't be costly, those days are long and over. Biodiesel is another factor, but demand, of course, not just because of what's happening in Europe. Demand is now exceeding supply, at least up until this week. Because there has been 3 refineries, one in Canada, one which I helped save, the Come By Chance refinery, which is down, and 2 in the U.S. Northeast, which closed over the past period post and pre-COVID. What this really meant is that the actual supply of diesel in North America is substantially lower, 50% below the past 5-year average. Of course, it doesn't help that the Biden administration in releasing yet again more oil that is not going to change the price of gasoline. It's still 14-15% higher in the United States than it was before the release of those precious barrels used for emergencies, not for price control. It looks like the release had a lot to do with heavier oil. Those heavy slates of oil are used by refiners to create diesel. The United States doesn't have the ability to create a lot of diesel with its own shale gas and fracking. It tends to produce a lot more in the way of gasoline versus Canada, which has that heavy oil, which of course isn't lost on Canadians when you think about it. The Americans are looking to drain 1 million barrels a day from that strategic reserve, which is now less than half of what it was just a year ago. And yet they decided to turn their back on the biggest reserve that they can rely on. That'd be the Canadian oil sands and of course, the Canadian oil picture. The killing of the Keystone XL pipeline by the Biden administration would have given them that $1 million barrels a day that they need to make ends meet. Nevertheless, it looks like it's going to be a bit of a up and down week, but generally speaking, not much in the way of change, at least until we get into the first weeks of November. And so for that, Nima, fasten your seatbelts. We got about a week's grace after that. Look for prices to go up, especially diesel. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Nima.
All right, thanks so much for that, Dan. Again, that was Dan McTeague, Senior Petroleum Analyst at GasWizard.ca. He is also the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy.